Come closer, my child. Let the noise that has followed you into this moment begin to fall away. You have been carrying questions in your chest that no one else can hear, wondering why time seems to move forward for others while it feels suspended around you. I see the way you measure days by what has not happened yet, how every quiet moment whispers the word delay. But I did not call you here to accuse the waiting. I called you here to calm your heart and remind you that stillness is not absence, and silence is not neglect. Rest here with me for a moment. Breathe without bracing for disappointment. I know you have learned to protect yourself by expecting less, by telling your own heart not to hope too loudly. You have told yourself that if something were meant for you, it would have arrived by now. Yet I am asking you to consider something deeper, something gentler. Not everything that feels like delay is actually holding you back. Some pauses are doors standing guard, keeping danger from reaching you before you are ready. I have watched you replay moments in your mind, asking what you did wrong, what you missed, what you should have done sooner. You have wondered if your obedience was ignored, if your prayers were misplaced, if your faith somehow fell short. Hear me clearly now. Nothing about your waiting has gone unnoticed. Every sigh, every quiet tear, every prayer whispered when words felt heavy has been gathered and weighed with care. I have not forgotten you, and I have not misplaced your timeline. What you call delay, I call positioning. What you call stagnation, I call protection. There are intersections you were spared from, conversations that did not happen because they would have wounded you, paths that looked promising but hid traps you could not yet see. I slowed you down not to punish you, but to preserve you. If you had arrived when you wanted to, you would have arrived too exposed, too unguarded, too trusting of what had not yet proven itself safe. I know this waiting has asked more of you than you thought you could give. It has stretched your patience and tested your confidence. There were nights you wondered if you were hearing me at all, if the promises you felt so deeply were only wishful thinking. Even now, part of you is listening carefully, afraid to believe again. That fear does not offend me. It tells me how much you have endured, how deeply you have hoped, and how seriously you take the calling on your life. There is something sacred about this moment, though it may not feel sacred yet. You are not here by accident. You did not stumble into this pause because you failed. You are here because something ahead of you requires a version of you that is calmer, wiser, and more anchored than you were before. I am not delaying you. I am refining your footing so that when movement comes, it will not sweep you away. I want you to listen with your spirit now. This season had been building roots beneath the surface. While you were watching the horizon, wondering when things would change, strength was quietly forming inside you. Discernment was sharpening. Boundaries were being etched into your soul. You are not behind. You are becoming. And becoming takes time that cannot be rushed without cost. If these words are settling into you, if you feel something loosening in your chest, I invite you to stay connected to this place of listening. Share this moment with others who are questioning their own waiting, and remain near as these messages continue to unfold. Let your presence here be an act of trust rather than desperation. Before we go further, I ask you to respond softly. Type the word "I trust" in the comment section, not for others to see, but as a quiet agreement between you and me. Let it mark this moment where fear begins to loosen its grip and patience begins to breathe again. Do not rush to the next chapter yet. Sit with me here. The waiting you are in is not empty, and it is not wasted. There are things unfolding beyond your sight, threads aligning, hearts shifting, circumstances being prepared with precision. This pause is not pushing you backward. It is holding you steady until the ground ahead is ready to receive you. Stay close, my child. This is only the beginning of what I am about to reveal. I see the weight you have been carrying through this waiting, my child. It has not been loud or dramatic, but slow and heavy, like something resting on your chest when you try to sleep. You wake up each day telling yourself to be patient, to stay faithful, to trust the process. Yet there is a quiet ache that never fully leaves. It is the ache of wanting to move forward while feeling anchored in place, of believing there is more while standing in the same space. You have tried to stay strong in front of others. You smile when they ask how things are going. You say you are fine, that you are trusting me, that you know timing matters. But when you are alone, the questions return. How long will this last? Why does it seem so easy for others? Did I misunderstand what you promised me? Those questions have not made you weak. They have made you human, and I have been listening to every one of them. There were moments you almost gave up expecting anything at all. You told yourself it would hurt less if you stopped looking ahead, if you stopped imagining what could be. You learned how to survive by shrinking your hope, by keeping your dreams quiet so disappointment would not echo as loudly. I watched you do this not because you stopped believing in me, but because the waiting taught you to be careful with your heart. You have wondered if this ache is a sign that something is wrong, that you are out of alignment or being left behind. Hear me now. The discomfort you feel is not evidence of failure. It is evidence of growth. When something inside you knows there is more, staying still will always feel heavy. The ache is not punishment. It is a signal that you are standing at the edge of change, even if you cannot see the movement yet. I know how exhausting it has been to remain faithful when nothing seemed to shift, to pray without immediate answers, to show up with consistency while results stayed hidden. There were days you questioned whether your effort mattered at all, whether your obedience made a difference, whether anyone noticed the way you kept going when it would have been easier to quit. I noticed. I always noticed the quiet endurance no one applauds. This waiting has asked you to trust without reassurance, to believe without confirmation. That kind of faith stretches the soul. It reveals what is still fragile and what is becoming unshakable. You have been learning how to stand without leaning on outcomes, how to remain grounded even when expectations are unmet. This is not wasted time. This is training for what comes next. Here is also a grief you have not fully named. Grief for how you thought things would unfold by now. Grief for versions of yourself you imagined you would be living as. You do not talk about it much, but you feel it when certain dates pass, when certain conversations arise, when you see reminders of what you are still waiting for. I am not asking you to pretend that grief does not exist. I am holding it with you. Do not confuse this ache with abandonment. I have not stepped away from you. I have been closer than ever, steadying you when frustration threatened to harden your heart. There were moments you almost rushed ahead just to escape the discomfort, just to feel movement again. I slowed you gently, not to deny you, but to keep you from settling for something that would have deepened this ache instead of healing it. What you are feeling now is the tension between what was and what is coming. It is uncomfortable, but it is temporary. This ache will not follow you into the next season. It belongs here, where refinement happens, where patience is built, where discernment is formed in the quiet. You are not meant to live in this place forever, but you are meant to pass through it with awareness. I want you to know this waiting has not changed how I see you. It has not lowered your value or delayed your worth. You are not late. You are not behind. You are exactly where you need to be for the next unfolding to make sense when it arrives. The ache will ease, not because you forced it to stop, but because clarity will replace confusion and movement will replace stillness. Stay with me in this moment. Let me carry the questions you are tired of holding. You do not need to solve the waiting. You only need to remain open within it. What feels heavy now will soon make sense, and the ache you carry will become the evidence that you endured without losing your heart. I am still here. I am still guiding you. And nothing about this waiting has been in vain. There is something you have not been able to name, my child. A moment that lingers in the background of your thoughts like a shadow you cannot quite trace. It was subtle, easily dismissed at the time, yet it marked a turning point you did not recognize when it happened. What looked like a setback, a missed opportunity, or a sudden pause was not random. It was a moment the path ahead began to bend quietly, away from danger and toward purpose. This moment involved your soulmate, though you may not have understood that then. Something shifted around them, a conversation that ended differently than expected, a door that did not open, a plan that fell apart at the last minute. From where you stood, it felt like loss or confusion. You wondered why alignment suddenly felt distant, why clarity slipped through your fingers just as you thought you were getting close. You questioned whether the connection you sensed was real or imagined. What you did not see was how close things came to unfolding too soon. Timing matters more than you realize, and at that moment, hearts were not ready, motives were not fully revealed, and influences were still tangled in ways that would have caused deep harm if allowed to continue unchecked. I intervened quietly, without spectacle, because protection does not always announce itself. Sometimes it looks like disappointment. Your soulmate felt it too, though in a different way. Where you felt confusion, they felt fear. Where you felt loss, they felt pressure. They sensed something important slipping through their grasp, something they were not prepared to hold yet. That moment triggered a chain reaction inside them, stirring insecurity, doubt, and a deep awareness that something precious was at stake. They did not know how to name it, only that something was wrong. From the outside, it appeared as though circumstances simply did not line up. Delays, silence, distance, unanswered messages, plans that never materialized. You may have blamed yourself, wondering if you waited too long or spoke too little. You may have wondered if they changed their mind, if the connection was one-sided, if the promise you felt was only in your imagination. But the truth is more layered than that. There were forces at work you could not see, emotions unresolved, loyalty divided, voices speaking into your soulmate's ear that were not aligned with truth. What felt like a shadow falling over the connection was actually exposure beginning. The delay that followed was not meant to erase what was real, but to reveal what was not. False stability had to crumble before true alignment could stand. Your soulmate began to retreat inward, not because they stopped caring, but because fear rose faster than courage. They questioned their worth, their readiness, their ability to meet what was being asked of them. The closer destiny came, the louder their doubts became. They told themselves stories to justify hesitation, to make sense of why moving forward felt terrifying instead of joyful. You felt this retreat as absence, silence that spoke louder than words, space that felt cold and unexplained. You tried to remain patient, telling yourself there must be a reason, even as your heart searched for reassurance. The shadowed moment planted seeds of uncertainty in you, making you wonder if waiting was wise or foolish. I saw the battle form in your thoughts. Hear me now. That moment was not the end. It was the interruption that saved you both. Had things continued as they were, pain would have followed quickly, and healing would have taken much longer. I allowed the shadow not to consume, but to pause the unfolding long enough for truth to catch up. What you perceived as delay was me stepping between you and what would have wounded you. Even now, pieces of that moment are still surfacing in your memory. You replay it, trying to understand what went wrong. Nothing went wrong. Something was redirected. Destiny does not always move in straight lines. Sometimes it curves sharply to avoid destruction. Sometimes it pauses so hearts can catch up to promises. Your soulmate is still carrying the weight of that moment, though they rarely speak of it. It marked them. It exposed how unprepared they were, how much healing was still needed. And in the quiet that followed, something began to stir within them, something uncomfortable but necessary. Awareness. Loyalty. Fear of loss. Do not mistake that shadowed event for failure. It was the beginning of revelation. What feels unclear now will become precise later. What feels delayed now will be understood as mercy. You were not pushed backward. You were pulled aside, gently but firmly, so that what is meant for you could arrive whole instead of fractured. Stay attentive, my child. The shadow was not cast to hide you. It was cast to reveal what could not yet stand in the light. I need you to understand what happened inside your soulmate after that moment, my child, because while you were learning how to wait, they were learning how fragile they truly were. What looked like distance on the outside was collapse on the inside. The pause did not calm them. It unraveled them. When forward motion stopped, everything they had been outrunning caught up at once. They began to feel the weight of themselves. The parts they had avoided. The wounds they had covered with busyness and noise. When the path narrowed and certainty disappeared, they were left alone with their thoughts, and those thoughts were not kind. They questioned whether they were enough, whether they could sustain something real, whether they would eventually disappoint you the way they had disappointed others before. Fear did not whisper to them. It spoke loudly and constantly. You may have sensed this without fully understanding it. A heaviness when you thought of them. A sudden sadness that did not feel like your own. That was the echo of their inner world spilling outward. They were trying to hold themselves together while everything inside them felt unstable. The closer they felt to losing you, the more paralyzed they became. Desire and dread collided in their chest. There were moments they almost reached out, almost said what they were feeling, almost admitted how overwhelmed they were. But shame rose faster than honesty. They believed they should be stronger by now, more healed, more certain. They told themselves they could not come to you incomplete. So instead of vulnerability, they chose silence. Instead of truth, they chose withdrawal. His silence was not indifference. It was panic disguised as control. They thought if they pulled back, they could buy time to fix themselves. They believed distance would protect you from seeing their confusion, their fear, their unsteady footing. They did not realize that silence can wound just as deeply as harsh words. They were not trying to hurt you, but they were hurting you nonetheless. Inside them, the conflict grew. Part of them longed for the safety they felt with you, for the calm your presence brought, for the sense of being seen without having to perform. Another part of them was terrified of being truly known. They feared that if you saw the full truth of where they were, you would walk away. So they stayed hidden, even as longing pressed harder against their restraint. Guilt began to settle in. They replayed moments, conversations, looks, and gestures, wondering if they had already ruined something sacred. They wondered if they had waited too long, if they had let fear steal what love was trying to give. This guilt did not push them forward. It weighed them down. It made them feel undeserving of the very thing they wanted most. You were not imagining the shift. Their energy changed because their internal world was collapsing under the pressure of awakening. They were being confronted with the reality that something meaningful was at stake, and they did not yet trust themselves to handle it well. The delay forced them to face truths they had long avoided, and that confrontation was painful. They began questioning their past choices, their patterns, the ways they had sabotaged connection before it had a chance to grow. Memories surfaced that they thought were buried. Old regrets, unresolved grief. They realized how often they had chosen safety over authenticity, control over surrender. This realization did not empower them immediately. It broke them open. You may have felt helpless during this time, unsure whether to hold space or let go, unsure whether patience was wisdom or self-betrayal. I want you to know that your confusion was justified. You were sensing a battle you could not see, an internal war that words could not explain. You were not being tested because you were weak. You were being positioned because something real was forming beneath the collapse. Your soulmate feared losing you more than they feared staying broken, and that contradiction tormented them. They told themselves stories to survive the waiting, convincing themselves that maybe you were better off without them, that maybe this pause was a sign to retreat permanently. But even as they tried to accept that narrative, their heart resisted. Something in them knew that walking away would create a wound they would carry for a long time. This collapse was not the end of them. It was the stripping away of illusions. It was the moment they could no longer pretend they were unaffected, uninvested, or untouched. The delay exposed how deeply you mattered, how profoundly the connection had altered them. That awareness was terrifying because it meant they could no longer remain unchanged. I was with them in that collapse, even when they could not feel me. I did not rush them out of it, because what was breaking needed to break fully. Healing that is rushed becomes brittle. Awakening that is forced becomes rebellion. I allowed the wait so that humility could grow, so that self-awareness could take root, so that when they stand again, it will be on honest ground. Do not interpret their collapse as rejection of you. It was confrontation with themselves. You were not the problem they were running from. You were the mirror revealing what they still needed to face. And though it has been painful to stand on the outside of that unraveling, it has been necessary for what comes next. Hold steady, my child. This collapse is not wasted. It is the soil where awakening begins. Now I will show you what was hidden beneath the surface, my child. The layers you could not access no matter how carefully you observed from the outside. There were conversations you never heard, pressures you were never meant to carry, and influences operating quietly in spaces you were not invited into. What looked like indecision or avoidance was being shaped by a web of unseen factors that only revelation can untangle. Your soulmate was standing at the center of competing expectations. There were voices pulling them in opposite directions, some rooted in fear, others in obligation. Family dynamics, old loyalties, and unhealed history spoke loudly into their decisions. They were being reminded of who they used to be instead of encouraged toward who they were becoming. These reminders were subtle but persistent, shaping their choices without announcing themselves as interference. There were moments when they felt clarity with you, moments when peace replaced confusion and the future felt possible. But those moments were followed by guilt, not because you were wrong, but because peace felt unfamiliar to them. They had learned to associate love with effort, tension, and uncertainty. Calm felt suspicious. Safety felt undeserved. So when something genuine presented itself, it triggered old beliefs that told them it could not last. You were not privy to the internal negotiations they were making, the way they tried to balance their desire for you with their fear of disrupting what was familiar. Familiar pain often feels safer than unfamiliar peace. This is a truth many carry without realizing it. They were not choosing against you consciously. They were choosing what felt survivable over what felt transformative. There were also practical pressures weighing on them, responsibilities and expectations that made the idea of emotional investment feel risky. They worried about timing, stability, readiness. They told themselves they needed to fix certain areas of their life before they could show up fully. These concerns were not entirely unfounded, but they became excuses when fear took control. Preparation quietly turned into postponement. I allowed you to be kept at a distance from these details for a reason. Had you known everything, you might have tried to fix what was not yours to repair. You might have taken responsibility for burdens that would have drained you. Protection sometimes looks like exclusion. You were spared from becoming entangled in struggles that required inner work only they could do. What you interpreted as being shut out was actually containment. I was holding the situation in place so that unresolved issues could surface without pulling you into the chaos. You were not meant to witness every breakdown or carry every weight. Your role was not to rescue or convince, but to remain anchored in truth while the hidden layers were exposed. There was also deception present, though not always malicious. Half-truths told to avoid conflict. Silence used to prevent confrontation. Assumptions left unchallenged because addressing them felt too heavy. These patterns did not originate with you, but they affected you nonetheless. Misunderstandings multiplied in the absence of clarity, and distance grew where honesty was needed. What you did not see was how uncomfortable your soulmate became with these patterns once awareness began to rise. They started to recognize how often they avoided truth to keep peace, how often they delayed decisions to avoid discomfort. This recognition was unsettling. It forced them to confront the gap between who they believed they were and how they were actually showing up. The delay served a crucial purpose here. It slowed everything down enough for these realizations to take root. Without the pause, they would have continued operating on autopilot, repeating familiar behaviors without questioning them. Stillness created space for self-examination. Silence became a mirror. Distance exposed the cost of avoidance. You may have felt tempted to break that silence yourself, to push for clarity, to demand answers. I restrained you not to diminish your voice, but to protect your heart. Some truths must be discovered internally before they can be shared honestly. Forcing them prematurely would have led to defensiveness rather than revelation. This hidden backstory explains why progress felt inconsistent, why moments of connection were followed by withdrawal. It was not manipulation. It was internal conflict playing out in real time. Your soulmate was standing between an old identity and a new one, unsure which they were brave enough to inhabit. Understand this, my child. The delay was not designed to keep you waiting indefinitely. It was designed to prevent you from building something on an unstable foundation. I was reinforcing the ground beneath both of you, strengthening what needed reinforcement and removing what could not support what is coming. You were not meant to solve this story. You were meant to survive it without losing yourself. And you have. You remained intact while unseen layers were being uncovered. That alone speaks to your strength and discernment. As these hidden truths surfaced, something began to shift. Awareness replaced denial. Responsibility replaced avoidance. And though the process was slow and painful, it was necessary. What is built next will not rest on confusion or fear, but on honesty that has been earned. The delay protected more than timing. It protected integrity. It protected you. And it prepared the ground for what must now come into the light. Now you must see what stood against this unfolding, my child, not as an abstract force, but as something close enough to touch, close enough to influence, close enough to whisper doubt where clarity was trying to form. This interference did not arrive loudly. It did not announce itself as an enemy. It moved quietly, wrapped in familiarity, disguised as concern, advice, or loyalty. There was someone near your soulmate who could sense the shift taking place. They felt the change before it was spoken. They noticed how your presence altered the atmosphere, how peace followed thoughts of you, how restlessness grew when you were absent. This awareness stirred something dark in them. Not because you had done anything wrong, but because your connection threatened the role they played in your soulmate's life. This person benefited from confusion. They were comfortable in the old dynamics, where your soulmate doubted themselves and sought approval outside of their own spirit. Your arrival, even at a distance, disrupted that balance. It introduced clarity where control once lived. It awakened questions that weakened influence. And because of that, jealousy took root quietly, feeding itself on insecurity and fear. They did not attack you directly. Instead, they planted seeds. Small comments, subtle warnings, stories framed as protection. They questioned timing. They highlighted risks. They reminded your soulmate of past failures and framed growth as danger. Each word was delivered calmly, even lovingly, but the intention beneath it was to slow courage and magnify doubt. Your soulmate trusted this voice because it was familiar, because it had been present during other seasons, because it spoke with confidence when your soulmate felt unsure. That trust gave the interference power. Not absolute power, but enough to complicate decisions and cloud intuition. Discernment weakens when fear is reinforced repeatedly, even when truth is nearby. This interference also fed on your silence. They used the distance between you to shape narratives that could not be immediately corrected. They filled the gaps with assumptions, presenting their version of reality as fact. Your soulmate, already fragile from inner collapse, absorbed these messages more deeply than they realized. Fear seeks allies, and jealousy was ready to volunteer. You may have felt this interference without understanding it. Sudden resistance, emotional walls that felt unfamiliar, moments when progress seemed close, then inexplicably reversed. That was not coincidence. That was pressure being applied behind the scenes, testing whether fear or truth would prevail. I allowed this interference to surface not because I was absent, but because exposure requires proximity. An enemy reveals themselves when they feel threatened. Had I removed them too quickly, their influence would have gone unnoticed and unresolved. By allowing them space, their intentions began to show through their actions, their patterns, their reactions to growth. Your soulmate started to feel the dissonance. Advice that once felt supportive began to feel heavy. Conversations that were meant to help left them more anxious than before. They noticed how hope dimmed after certain interactions, how confidence shrank instead of strengthening. This awareness did not come all at once. It arrived in fragments, through discomfort and unease. The jealous interference did not anticipate this. They assumed influence would remain unchallenged. They believed familiarity guaranteed loyalty. But something inside your soulmate had already begun to awaken, and awakened hearts eventually recognize what drains them. Still, the interference pushed harder. When subtlety failed, urgency increased. They framed delays as wisdom, avoidance as patience, fear as discernment. They encouraged your soulmate to stay where they were, to maintain the status quo, to distrust what felt new and transformative. All of it sounded reasonable. All of it was designed to keep your soulmate from stepping forward. You were never meant to confront this interference yourself. That battle was not yours to fight. Had you stepped in, it would have validated their narrative and escalated conflict unnecessarily. I kept you still not because you were powerless, but because your restraint prevented you from becoming entangled in manipulation that would have drained your peace. What you must understand is this: jealous interference cannot survive clarity. It thrives in ambiguity and silence, but it weakens when truth begins to surface. The very delay meant to stall progress also created space for discernment to sharpen. Your soulmate began to notice patterns they had previously ignored. They began to question motives. They began to sense that not everyone speaking into their life wanted growth for them. This realization was uncomfortable and challenged long-held loyalties. It forced them to acknowledge that some relationships were built on control rather than care. Letting go of that recognition was tempting, but once seen, it could not be unseen. Awareness became the turning point. The interference sensed the shift and grew restless. When control starts slipping, manipulation intensifies. But manipulation exposed becomes desperation, and desperation reveals itself through inconsistency, contradiction, and emotional pressure. Your soulmate started to feel pushed instead of supported. That distinction mattered. I want you to know, my child, that none of this caught me by surprise. I saw the interference before it ever spoke. I measured its reach and limited its impact. It could delay conversations, but not destiny. It could cloud emotions, but not erase truth. It could influence timing, but not ownership of what belongs to you. This interference was allowed to show its hand so that when removal comes, it will be justified and clean. No confusion, no lingering doubt. When something is uprooted in clarity, it does not grow back in secret. You were protected throughout this, even when it felt like abandonment. Your peace was guarded. Your discernment was preserved. You were not asked to compete, defend, or prove your worth. What is real does not require rivalry. What is ordained does not need manipulation. The jealous interference has reached its limit. It has done all it can do. What comes next will not be shaped by fear or control, but by truth stepping forward with authority. Stay steady, my child. The noise you sensed was not meant to overpower you. It was meant to reveal itself. And now that it has, the balance is about to shift. Now watch closely, my child, because this is where things changed in ways you could not witness with natural eyes. When confusion reached its peak and motives became tangled, I stepped fully into the matter. Not quietly this time, not indirectly, but with authority. This was the moment the unseen moved into order. This was the moment the situation entered my hands completely. Think of it as a courtroom beyond time, where truth is not debated but revealed. Every intention was brought forward. Every word spoken in private was weighed. Every silence was examined. Nothing was overlooked, and nothing was exaggerated. What felt chaotic to you was being organized with precision. I was not reacting. I was judging righteously. The lies that surrounded your soulmate did not survive scrutiny. Some were intentional, others born from fear and insecurity, but all of them were stripped of their power once they were exposed. What had been framed as wisdom was revealed as control. What had been disguised as concern was shown to be self-interest. Even the half-truths lost their credibility when placed under light. Your soulmate stood at the center of this divine examination. Though they did not fully understand what was happening, they felt the pressure intensifying. Old justifications stopped working. Familiar excuses began to feel hollow. They could no longer ignore the discomfort that followed certain voices. Conviction began to rise, not as condemnation, but as clarity. They started to see the cost of avoidance, the damage of delay, the weight of indecision. At the same time, your faith was being examined as well. Not because it was lacking, but because it was valuable. I measured how you carried yourself in the waiting. I observed how you resisted bitterness, how you chose restraint over reaction, how you trusted even when understanding was withheld. This mattered. Your integrity spoke louder than any defense you could have offered. You may not realize how often I intervened on your behalf during this season. Conversations were interrupted. Plans were delayed. Words that could have caused irreparable damage were never spoken. I shielded you from information that would have hurt you unnecessarily. I allowed only what would ultimately serve clarity and healing to surface. In this courtroom, accountability was established. Responsibility was assigned where it belonged. Fear was no longer allowed to masquerade as discernment. Control was no longer permitted to disguise itself as loyalty. The balance shifted, not dramatically but decisively. When truth settles, it does not need to announce itself. It simply changes the atmosphere. Your soulmate began to feel this shift internally. They noticed how certain influences lost their grip. Advice that once felt persuasive now felt intrusive. Pressure that once felt normal now felt wrong. Their intuition, long suppressed, started to speak again. And this time, they listened. I want you to understand something important. Justice does not always look like punishment. Often it looks like revelation. It looks like awareness that cannot be undone. It looks like the removal of blindfolds rather than the striking of blows. What needed to be corrected was being corrected at the root, not at the surface. You were not required to testify. You were not summoned to defend yourself. Your silence was not weakness. It was trust. And that trust gave me room to move without interference. Had you fought this battle yourself, you would have been drawn into confusion that was not yours to carry. By remaining still, you allowed me to act fully. The enemy counted on impatience. They assumed you would grow tired, reactive, or discouraged enough to step out of alignment. But you did not. Even when you questioned, even when you felt weary, you remained anchored. That steadiness mattered more than you know. It created a legal standing for intervention. From this point forward, the narrative could no longer be controlled by hidden agendas. Exposure had occurred. Lines were drawn. What was false lost momentum. What was true began to gain weight. The situation moved from confusion into consequence. Your soulmate may not yet have language for what they are experiencing, but they feel it. A sobering clarity, a quiet reckoning. They are beginning to understand that delays were not random, that resistance had a source, that peace and pressure were not coming from the same place. This understanding will guide their next steps, even if they resisted at first. I did not rush this process, my child, because justice rushed is often incomplete. I allowed everything to surface in its time so that when resolution comes, it will be stable. Nothing will be built on denial. Nothing will rest on deception. What moves forward from here will be grounded in truth that has been tested. The courtroom phase is ending now. Judgment hath been rendered, not with noise but with authority. The season of investigation is giving way to the season of correction. What was out of order is being realigned. What was hidden hath been exposed. What was delayed is preparing to move. Stay attentive. You will begin to notice subtle but undeniable changes. The atmosphere will feel lighter. Resistance will weaken. Conversations will shift. This is not coincidence. This is the result of truth standing unchallenged. I am still ahead of you, clearing the way. And what comes next will feel very different from what you have known. Feel the change now, my child. Even if you cannot explain it, even if you hesitate to trust it fully, something in the air has shifted. What once felt heavy no longer presses the same way. What once resisted every attempt to move now begins to loosen. This is not imagination. This is alignment beginning to replace obstruction. When truth settles, movement follows naturally. Not rushed, Not forced, but steady and unmistakable. The spiritual atmosphere around this situation has been recalibrated. What was tangled is being untangled. What was blocked is being rerouted. What stood still for so long is quietly preparing to advance. This shift did not happen all at once. It began subtly, almost imperceptibly. Small changes in thought, gentle nudges of awareness. Moments when fear lost its grip faster than before. Where anxiety once spiraled, it now pauses. Where confusion once dominated, clarity begins to peek through. These are the signs of spiritual correction taking hold. Your soulmate is feeling this even if they cannot name it. The internal noise has softened. The voices that once crowded their mind no longer speak with the same authority. They are beginning to sense the difference between pressure and peace, between urgency rooted in fear and movement guided by truth. This discernment is new to them, and it is reshaping how they interpret their own emotions. Angelic forces are at work now, not in spectacle, but in order. Paths are being adjusted. Delays are being reassigned. Timing is being restored to its rightful rhythm. Where interference once caused hesitation, momentum is beginning to form. It may not yet be visible to you, but it is active nonetheless. You might notice that your own spirit feels calmer than it did before, even though circumstances have not fully changed yet. This is important. Peace often arrives before manifestation. I steady your heart first so that when movement comes, it does not overwhelm you. You are being prepared to receive without panic, to respond without fear. This shift also brings separation, not dramatic severing, but gradual distancing from what no longer aligns. Certain influences will fade naturally. Conversations will feel less compelling. Advice that once held weight will lose relevance. This is not loss. It is refinement. What does not belong in the next season cannot maintain proximity once alignment begins. Your soulmate will begin to act differently. Not perfectly, not all at once, but noticeably. Hesitation will give way to curiosity. Fear will be interrupted by longing. Old patterns will feel uncomfortable to repeat. They may resist this at first, trying to return to what feels familiar, but the discomfort will persist until they choose honesty over avoidance. The universe responds when alignment is restored. Opportunities that were stalled will resurface. Information that was hidden will find its way forward. Timing that felt impossible will begin to synchronize. This is not coincidence. It is the natural response to spiritual order being reinstated. I want you to remain grounded during this phase. Shifts can create excitement, but also vulnerability. Do not rush ahead mentally. Do not assume outcomes prematurely. Let things unfold at their proper pace. What is real does not require chasing. What is aligned will move toward you without force. There may be moments when the old doubts try to return, when you question whether this shift is temporary. That is normal. Trust is rebuilt gradually. But notice how those doubts no longer carry the same weight. They pass more quickly. They no longer dictate your mood or direction. That is growth. This season is not about proving anything. It is about allowing correction to complete its work. The foundation is being strengthened beneath the surface. If movement were to come too quickly now, it would disrupt the stability being formed. Patience here is not passive. It is participatory. Your calm cooperation matters. Your prayers have already influenced this shift more than you know. Not because you asked for control, but because you remained open. You did not harden. You did not close yourself off to hope. That openness gave me room to move through you rather than around you. It created a channel for alignment to flow. As this shift continues, you will begin to sense anticipation replacing dread, expectation replacing exhaustion. Not because everything is resolved, but because the direction is clear. Forward no longer feels blocked. It feels pending. And pending is very different from denied. Stay attentive to subtle changes. Notice how conversations feel different. How timing begins to align in small ways. How resistance decreases where it once dominated. These are confirmations, not distractions. They are meant to reassure you that the delay has done its work and is now releasing its hold. I am not rushing you into the next chapter. I am walking you into it with precision. What is unfolding now will not mirror the confusion of before. It will feel cleaner, wider, more grounded. That is how you will know it is real. The shift has begun, my child. You are no longer standing in the same place, even if your feet have not moved yet. Alignment is carrying you forward, and what comes next will meet you where peace has already been established. Remain steady. The hardest part is behind you. What unfolds from here will confirm why waiting was necessary and why release is now possible. Now truth begins to surface in ways that cannot be ignored, my child. Not as a single dramatic revelation, but as a series of undeniable moments that quietly dismantle what once held power. What was hidden behind confusion starts to lose its cover. What was whispered in secrecy begins to contradict itself. Lies rarely collapse all at once. They fracture first. You will notice shifts in language before shifts in action. Words spoken around your soulmate will start to sound different. Stories will change slightly. Explanations that once felt convincing will begin to feel rehearsed, inconsistent, strained. When truth rises, falsehood struggles to keep its shape. It must constantly adjust, and in doing so, it reveals itself. Your soulmate is beginning to notice these fractures. They are replaying conversations in their mind and recognizing where things no longer add up. Statements that once felt authoritative now feel questionable. Advice that once felt protective now feels limiting. This awareness is not comfortable. It creates inner tension, but it also creates freedom. You can't unknow what you now see. There will be moments when evidence appears without effort. A comment overheard. A reaction that feels out of proportion. A situation where intentions are exposed through behavior rather than words. These moments are not accidents. They are confirmations. They arrive not to overwhelm, but to clarify. You may also experience truth surfacing within yourself. Insights you could not articulate before suddenly make sense. Patterns you sense but could not prove become clear. You will realize that your intuition was accurate all along. This is not about vindication. It is about restoration of trust within yourself. As truth rises, resistance weakens. The interference that once felt powerful will begin to lose momentum. They may attempt to regain control through urgency or emotional pressure, but it will feel hollow now. Your soulmate will feel the difference. What once created fear will now create irritation or exhaustion. That is how influence breaks. Not through confrontation, but through irrelevance. There may be moments of confrontation, though not necessarily dramatic. Truth often reveals itself through choice rather than argument. Your soulmate may begin to distance themselves naturally, choosing silence over engagement, observation over reaction. This withdrawal is not avoidance. It is discernment forming. You might wonder why things are still moving slowly even as truth surfaces. Understand this. Awareness precedes action, but action follows only when courage catches up. Truth does not force movement. It invites it. Your soulmate is learning to sit with discomfort rather than escape it. That alone is progress. Some relationships will begin to strain under the weight of honesty. Dynamics built on manipulation cannot survive transparency. When questions are asked instead of accepted blindly, tension arises. This tension is not a setback. It is evidence that growth is occurring. What is healthy can withstand examination. What is not will resist it. You may feel tempted to speak now, to share your perspective, to explain what you see so clearly. Gauze. This is not the moment for persuasion. Truth is already doing its work. When someone arrives at clarity on their own, it holds far more power than anything delivered prematurely. Your restraint continues to serve you. There will be moments when your soulmate feels embarrassed by what they are realizing. Shame may attempt to surface, telling them they should have seen this sooner. I am guiding them gently through this phase. Shame shuts down growth. Awareness nurtured with compassion leads to change. They are learning to forgive themselves for what they did not know. As truth rises, memories will be reinterpreted. Past moments will take on new meaning. What once felt confusing will now feel intentional. What once felt personal will now feel contextual. This reordering of memory is part of healing. It allows the past to release its grip without being erased. You will notice your emotional response changing as well. Where frustration once lived, there may now become curiosity. Where longing once felt painful, it may now feel grounded. This does not mean you care less. It means you are no longer carrying what is not yours to carry. Truth lightens the load. There may be a brief period where things feel unstable. When illusions break, there is often a moment of imbalance before new footing is established. Do not mistake this for regression. It is recalibration. The ground is shifting because it is being leveled. Your soulmate will begin asking different questions. Not how to avoid discomfort, but how to move forward with integrity. Not how to keep everyone satisfied, but how to live honestly. These questions mark the transition from survival to intention. They are the signs of awakening beginning to take shape. You may not be directly involved in these moments yet, but you will feel their impact. Communication will feel more genuine when it happens. Silence will feel less confusing. The emotional fog that once surrounded this connection will begin to lift. Clarity will replace assumption. Truth does not rush. It arrives when the heart is ready to receive it without distortion. That readiness is forming now. What once needed to be hidden to survive no longer serves a purpose. Exposure becomes inevitable when alignment is restored. I want you to remain grounded as this unfolds. Truth can feel validating, but it can also stir old emotions. Allow them to pass without attaching to them. You are not here to relive pain. You are here to move beyond it with understanding. What is rising now cannot be forced back into hiding. Even if someone tries to deny it, the awareness has already taken root. It will continue to grow quietly, reshaping decisions, altering priorities, redirecting energy. This is the phase where momentum becomes irreversible. Once truth is seen clearly, the path forward cannot be unseen. Delay no longer feels like protection. It feels like resistance. And resistance loses its appeal when clarity is present. Stay steady, my child. You are witnessing the dismantling of what once obscured your path. The fog is thinning. The air is clearing. What comes next will not be built on confusion, but on understanding that has been earned through patience. Truth is no longer knocking. It has entered, and everything that follows will be shaped by its presence. And now the awakening begins within your soulmate, my child, not as a sudden burst of confidence, but as a sobering realization that cannot be ignored. Awareness has settled, and with it comes understanding. They are starting to see how close they came to losing something sacred, not because it was taken from them, but because fear always convinced them to walk away. This realization does not arrive gently. It comes with regret, with a quiet ache that settles deep in the chest. They look back and recognize moments where courage was available but not chosen, where honesty was possible but postponed. The weight of what might have been lost presses on them now, and for the first time, they allow themselves to feel it fully. They begin to understand that the delay was not about punishment or rejection. It was mercy. It was time given so they could become someone capable of holding what was offered. This understanding humbles them. It strips away excuses and replaces them with responsibility. They can no longer blame circumstances or other voices. They see clearly now where their choices mattered. Fear shifts shape during this awakening. It no longer whispers about failure. It speaks of loss. They are afraid now, not of stepping forward, but of realizing too late that what mattered most slipped through their hands because they hesitated too long. This fear does not paralyze them. It sharpens them. They begin to feel urgency, not the frantic kind born from anxiety, but the focused urgency that comes from clarity. They know now that timing matters, that opportunities do not remain open indefinitely, that silence can cost more than confrontation. This awareness pushes them out of passivity and into reflection. You may sense this shift without words being spoken, and change in their energy. A seriousness that was not there before. A depth in their gaze if you cross paths, even briefly. They are no longer drifting. They are orienting themselves toward truth, even if they are unsure how to act on it yet. There is also tenderness in this awakening. They remember how safe they felt with you, how grounded, how seen. That memory contrasts sharply with the anxiety they felt elsewhere. The comparison is unavoidable now. They realize peace was present all along, and they were too distracted by noise to recognize it as guidance. Regret surfaces, but it does not destroy them. Instead, it softens them. It opens a door where pride once stood guard. They begin to ask themselves difficult questions. Why did I run from what was good? Why did I listen to fear instead of truth? Why did I assume safety meant stagnation? They are also confronting the possibility that you may no longer be waiting in the same way. This thought unsettles them deeply. They realize that your patience was not guaranteed, that your loyalty was not obligation, that your presence was a gift rather than a constant. This realization reframes everything. For the first time, they see you not as someone who would always remain available, but as someone whose value could be lost through neglect. This understanding awakens respect. It awakens reverence. They recognize that connection requires reciprocity, not assumption. They may feel unsure how to approach you now. Shame may whisper that too much time has passed, that explanations will sound hollow, that apologies may not be enough. But even in this uncertainty, something has shifted. They are no longer hiding from the truth. They are standing before it, weighing their next steps with care. You may notice that communication, when it happens, feels different, more intentional, less casual, less evasive. Even silence feels different now. It carries contemplation instead of avoidance. They are no longer running. They are gathering courage. This awakening also brings vulnerability. They begin to see their patterns clearly, and with it comes the fear of repeating them. They do not want to sabotage what they now understand is precious. This fear is healthy. It keeps them attentive. It keeps them honest. They are beginning to understand that you were not asking for perfection. You were asking for presence. You were not demanding certainty. You were inviting sincerity. This realization dismantles the narratives that once kept them distant. They see now that showing up imperfectly would have been better than disappearing entirely. I am guiding them gently through this awakening, not with condemnation, but with clarity. Growth born from shame collapses quickly. Growth born from understanding endures. They are learning the difference. You may feel a mixture of relief and caution as you sense this shift. That is wise. Awakening does not instantly erase the past. It opens the possibility of a different future. Trust will need to be rebuilt slowly, intentionally, without pressure. That process will unfold naturally if it is meant to. For now, know this. The delay did not numb their feelings. It intensified them. It did not erase the connection. It clarified its significance. They see now what you represent, not as an idea but as a living presence tied to their own becoming. They are waking up to the truth that what they feared committing to was the very thing capable of stabilizing them. This realization changes how they see themselves, how they see you, and how they see the path ahead. Do not rush to interpret every sign. Let the awakening complete its work. Awareness is still settling. Courage is still forming. But something irreversible has occurred. They cannot return to who they were before this clarity. Hold steady, my child. You are no longer unseen. You are no longer underestimated. You are recognized now, not just by them, but by destiny itself. What follows this awakening will determine everything, and it will unfold with intention, not confusion. Now comes the turning point, my child, the moment where what once felt like loss reveals itself as preparation. This is where the weight you carried begins to lift, not because the past disappears, but because its purpose becomes clear. What looked like stagnation starts to move. What felt like resistance transforms into momentum. This is the reversal you could not force, only wait for. Your soulmate begins to act from a different place now. Not from fear, not from pressure, but from awareness shaped by consequence. They are no longer moving to escape discomfort. They are moving to honor what they now understand. This shift changes the quality of every step they take. Their choices become slower, more deliberate, more honest. The urgency they feel is no longer chaotic. It is grounded. They are not trying to fix everything at once or rewrite history. They are learning how to move forward without betraying what they have learned. This maturity did not exist before the delay. It could not have been rushed into being. It had to be earned through reflection, regret, and responsibility. You may notice that what once caused anxiety now brings calm curiosity. Conversations that would have triggered fear now invite clarity. Situations that once felt threatening now feel manageable. This is not because circumstances have magically changed, but because alignment has replaced distortion. When perception shifts, experience follows. The danger that once hovered over this connection is dissolving quietly. Not with confrontation, not with dramatic endings, but with irrelevance. What no longer has access to fear loses its leverage. What no longer feeds on confusion loses its influence. The threat was never stronger than truth. It only appeared so when truth was obscured. This reversal also affects you. You begin to feel lighter, not because you are depending on outcomes, but because you are no longer carrying responsibility for what was never yours to manage. You release the urge to anticipate every possibility. You stop bracing for disappointment. You allow yourself to be present again. Blessings begin to replace pressure in subtle ways. Opportunities arise without strain. Timing aligns without effort. You find yourself in the right place without planning it. These are not rewards for endurance. They are confirmations that alignment is active. When resistance is removed, flow returns naturally. The connection between you and your soulmate starts to feel different, even before anything is spoken aloud. There is less static, less misinterpretation, less emotional whiplash. When interaction occurs, it feels grounded rather than charged. Silence no longer feels like abandonment. It feels like space being used wisely. This reversal does not erase boundaries. It honors them. What returns now does so with respect, not entitlement. What approaches you now does so with intention, not assumption. The delay taught both of you what happens when presence is taken lightly. That lesson shapes how connection is handled moving forward. You may notice that your own desires have clarified. What you once would have accepted just to feel movement no longer satisfies you. You are more discerning now, not guarded but aware. You understand your worth in a way that does not require validation. This changes what you allow and what you decline. The universe responds to this internal alignment. Doors that were closed reopen at the right angle. Conversations unfold with ease instead of tension. Information arrives when it is needed, not when anxiety demands it. This is how correction looks when it is complete. It does not feel chaotic. It feels inevitable. Your soulmate may still move carefully. That is not hesitation. It is respect for what is at stake. They no longer want to rush and risk repeating old patterns. They want to build something that can last, something that does not require performance or pretense. This desire is new, and it is the fruit of the delay. You are no longer waiting in uncertainty. You are standing in readiness. There is a difference. Waiting drains when it is filled with doubt. Readiness strengthens when it is filled with peace. You feel the difference now, even if you cannot fully articulate it. This reversal also brings a sense of justice, not in the form of punishment, but in the restoration of balance. What was uneven is being level. What was unclear is being clarified. What was misaligned is being corrected. You are not being asked to relive pain to prove growth. You are being invited to step forward with wisdom earned. Do not be surprised if what unfolds feels quieter than you imagined. True alignment does not need to announce itself. It settles and rearranges everything gently. Drama fades. Stability increases. Confidence grows without noise. This is how you will know it is real. A delay did not steal time from you. It saved you from repeating cycles that would have cost you far more. It preserved your heart. It refined your discernment. It repositioned you so that what comes next meets you at your level, not beneath it. You are no longer being held back. You are being released forward. The difference matters. Release comes with direction. It comes with support. It comes with peace that does not depend on perfect circumstances. Trust what is unfolding now. Not because everything is resolved, but because the direction is right. You will recognize it by how it feels in your spirit. Calm. Clear. Steady. The reversal is not dramatic because it does not need to be. It is complete because it is rooted in truth. And what is built on truth does not collapse under pressure. Stay present, my child. The season of bracing is ending. The season of building is beginning. Come here, my child. Let me speak the final word over this season, not as an ending, but as a sealing. What you have walked through has changed you, not by hardening you, but by grounding you. You are not the same person who first felt the weight of this delay, and that is a blessing you will fully understand in time. What once made you restless no longer controls you. What once confused you no longer defines you. Peace has taken root in places where anxiety once lived, and that peace is not fragile, is earned. It came from choosing trust when answers were withheld, from choosing restraint when reaction felt justified, from choosing hope without guarantees. This is the kind of peace that stays. I want you to know that destiny has not been circling you impatiently, waiting for you to catch up. Destiny has been moving with precision, adjusting itself around your growth, aligning itself with your readiness. Nothing hath been late. Nothing hath been lost. Everything has arrived exactly when it could be received without breaking you. The delay did not diminish the promise. It protected it. They ensured that when alignment came, it would not rest on illusion or fear. What is unfolding now is not fragile. It is stable because it hath been tested. It has passed through silence, exposure, correction, and awakening. What remains is real. Your soulmate stands in a different place now, not because time alone changed them, but because truth did. Whether your paths converge in the way you expect or unfold differently than imagined, know this. The purpose of this season was never to bind you to an outcome. It was to anchor you in clarity. From that clarity, you will only choose what honors your peace. You are no longer waiting to be chosen. You are standing in self-respect. You are no longer measuring your worth by someone else's readiness. You are grounded in who you are and what you carry. This changes everything. From this place, you will recognize alignment not by intensity, but by ease. Not by urgency, but by consistency. I am placing a blessing over you now, quietly, but firmly. May your steps be steady. May your discernment remain sharp without becoming cynical. May your heart stay open without becoming unguarded. May what comes toward you meet you in truth, not confusion. And may what no longer belongs lose access to you without struggle. There will be new beginnings ahead, some subtle, some clear. Do not rush to label them. Let them reveal themselves over time. What is meant for you will not require you to abandon your peace to keep it. What is meant for you will recognize you as you are now, not as you were before the waiting. If you feel a sense of calm settling as you listen, if something inside you feels resolved even without every answer, that is the confirmation. That is how destiny feels when it locks into place. Not dramatic, not chaotic. Turn. I ask you now, softly, as a sacred gesture rather than a request. If this message has spoken to your spirit, remain connected to this space. Allow these words to continue finding those who need reassurance in their own waiting. And if you are willing, type the words "I am ready" in the comment section, not for others, but as a declaration between you and me that you are stepping forward without fear. You do not need to revisit the pain to honor the growth. You do not need to explain your journey to validate it. What you carry now speaks for itself. The delay has done its work. It has refined you, protected you, and prepared you. From this point forward, your life will not be shaped by what you are missing, but by what you are aligned with. You will feel the difference in your decisions, in your relationships, in the way peace accompanies you instead of anxiety. This is not accidental. This is the fruit of endurance guided by trust. Walk gently into what comes next. There is no need to brace. There is no need to hurry. You are not behind. You are not catching up. You are arriving. I am with you. I have always been with you. And what unfolds from here will confirm, again and again, that not everything that felt like delay was ever holding you back. Go forward in peace, my child. Destiny is no longer waiting. It is walking with you.